Welcome back to Truck Talk, everyone. This is Alan Adler, your host. We've spent quite a bit of time this year in several episodes talking about the new Volvo VNL. This is a truck that is 90% all new. First time there's been a purpose-built over-the-road truck from Volvo in North America that has purpose-built. Today we're spending time with Haley Sage, who is the Learning Program Manager. Is that correct?
Yes.
For Volvo Academy. And we're here in High Point, North Carolina today. Opportunity to sort of get into some of the behind the scenes stuff truly that goes on with this. Haley, thanks for joining us. It's really one of those topics that maybe doesn't come up at every cocktail party, but training is something that is, I guess, integral, really important for what happens with a new product.
That is absolutely right. I mean, especially when you look at the all-new Volvo VNL, it's over 90% brand new. So we are really faced with a challenge as a training organization. How do we get so much information across to our audience, to our salespeople, in a way that's consumable, that's effective, really helps them to understand the features, the benefits, and the value of this new product?
Well, we'll get to value proposition in just a moment, but one of the things when you have an all-new product, this was 7 years in gestation.
Yes, it was.
You weren't doing the training programming that long ago. A couple of years? Is that kind of when you joined?
About 2.5 years now, yeah.
And at that point, things are firm enough that you could begin to come up with some kind of, what are we going to tell the people? And yet, I think you kind of indicated that maybe, things do change. They continue to evolve.
That's absolutely right. I mean, that's the name of the game when it comes to training. We constantly have to be adapting and evolving with training to adapt to the market, to the product, any changes. This market itself is ever changing on a regular basis. So this product is no different.
Well, and I think, we've seen the competition come with some newer product. I mean,
Sure.
For example, we know International has a new, they say their final diesel-powered vehicle that they're in launch with still at this point. So you're constantly having to think about those things too, because they're all pitching and training and doing all that.
Exactly.
Let's talk about training for the next few minutes anyway, in terms of who gets trained and how. Maybe we could start with dealers. How did you do that? And, kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot to it. We've got many roles that we're responsible for. Our role as Volvo, or our audience as Volvo Trucks Academy, is the dealer. Mm-hmm. So you've got to think that includes everybody in the sales organization. That includes our parts and service professionals. That includes our technicians. There's all roles in the dealership that need to be educated on this product and how to best sell it, service it, et cetera. So we take sales training to start. That was really our bread and butter. That was our main focus. And we started by launching an online training curriculum. So this was 6 modules. We really dove into the value pillars that we call them, fuel efficiency, safety, driver productivity, connectivity, uptime. And the common theme with this training was, what is the value? What is the value proposition? How do we frame this conversation and focus this around the value that this product will bring to the customer and their business?
It's the relationship between salesperson and customer is such that the customer, they might read media stories and things like that about a truck, but they're really looking to that salesperson to tell them what they need to know. How does that relationship work? And of course, it's trust-based, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, they rely so heavily on their salesperson's knowledge, on their expertise, and really their guidance. We want our salespeople to be an advocate. We want them to be a consultant to the customer and their business. And, I think it all stems from training to a degree, as with anything does.
Well, the confidence comes from it, right? I mean,
absolutely.
You're confident because you've had both in-person and, video modules and things like that. I mean, there is a connecting point. You talked a little bit about the idea of doing sort of, I think we used to call it at GM, we used to call it the cave experience, where you literally had a place where, you could virtually operate the truck. Mm-hmm. I think they charge for that at an arcade, by the way. But the idea being that, this is where you get that sort of, and when I did this is what it felt like. So the communication between a salesperson and customer, what kind of questions are coming back? Because it is a two-way discussion, right? I mean,
Sure.
At the end of the day, we know it's about total cost of ownership. We know that, and that's how the decision gets made. But at a lower level, at the road level, if you will, as these customers are learning about the truck, they're having to figure out, how am I going to communicate this further down the chain, right?
Mm-hmm. They are, and I think it goes back to, as you mentioned, the various types of training and the messaging that comes across the salesperson. So we really started with this online training modules, as you mentioned. This was a series of 6 modules. We also launched a broadcast series. So similar to our location right now, we did host some targeted, we branded them Academy Live series. And this is where we really dove into some specific areas of focus or some questions, maybe some items that were coming from the field to really, again, prepare and give them the tools and the confidence to address those. And ultimately, this all led up until the in-person training at the Customer Center in Dublin this past summer.
Sure.
And, in person, it was their first chance to see the product, to drive the truck, to really get that hands-on familiarization. So throughout the in-person launch, we put them, again, in the customer's shoes, really gave them those opportunities to understand what are they looking for, what's the value of their business, and how do you articulate, how do you have those conversations successfully?
One of the things that we know about the VNL is that it will be the basis for pretty much everything, probably for the next 10 or 15 years. But certainly, as we get into alternative powertrains, you guys kind of teased an electric version. Haven't really given a lot of details on it. We know that it's the basis of your work with Aurora innovation on autonomy and things like that. Just a lot of that stuff probably comes a little later as you get into those niches really of the product. But right now it's the truck, and how do we get customers to not just to spec it? I'm sure that's part of the training,
Right.
but how do we get them to put it on the consideration list, right? I mean,
That's exactly it. And you mentioned earlier, as training, we don't come in at the very beginning with the product. We do come in a little bit later once things are more established and we have an idea. What exactly are our training goals? What are our objectives? What does our audience need to know? What do they need to do with this information?
Right.
So future technologies down the road will come in a little bit once those are a little bit more mature.
Sure, and you can always do add-on programs. I mean,
That's exactly right.
as well as probably reinforce a good bit of what you've done. Now, when it comes to the sales teams, and again, I think video training is pretty common across the industry. So I have a background in cars from General Motors or passenger vehicles, and a lot of it was done that way. Sandy Corporation and others that would do the training. You have pretty much your own, as you said, academy. I think that's where we're sitting. Really, is in the academy. Do you rely on outsiders, or is it all pretty much developed internally here?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a little bit of both. So we do have an in-house team that develop training. As I mentioned, we cover all areas of the dealer network. So we've got a team that's dedicated towards that. But we do also supplement with external and partners as well.
Yeah. When we talk about the other areas that get training, obviously technician training comes to mind, and for a couple of reasons. One is they've got to know how to maintain the vehicle, fix the vehicle, whatever. But they also, it's an area that is constantly trying to attract people. It's been an area, and I know Volvo years ago was doing work to help, kind of build out some of the training, not just, the ability to be trainers. Excuse me, I say trainers, I meant technicians, to grow the number of technicians. How was that challenge handled, knowing that you've got those who are there today, but they move around a lot, there's a lot of job jumping and that kind of thing. How do you handle the technician training?
Another good question. We've got a very comprehensive sort of onboarding plan when it comes to all of our training. So role-based, again, sales, service, technical, we start with kind of a new hire program. So from day one, we're providing online training, in-person training, whatever the specific role may call for. Technical in particular, as you mentioned, I mean, it's a challenge. These trucks are 90% new, so of course we've got a pretty big opportunity ahead of us when it comes to servicing these products as well. So combination of online training as well as in-person, hands-on, because you can't learn everything online, especially when it comes to servicing the trucks. So we've pulled together a really comprehensive plan to support that audience.
It's interesting as we are talking, we're now at the point where customer deliveries are underway. I guess you could call that crunch time. I mean, this is when you find out if the training you did really stuck, right?
That's right.
How do you approach this as we do begin to get deliveries, multiple deliveries really of these trucks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think a few different options, a few different ways. So first is preparing our technicians, preparing our dealer technicians. So we're doing that through, again, a series of online training, but also we'll be hosting in-person workshops we know you can't learn everything online, especially when it comes to servicing this new truck. So we want to bring our fixed operations leadership team to our regional training centers. We have these across the United States and Canada, and we'll really give them that opportunity to get hands-on familiarization with the product, pairs, the new technology and components. So really making sure that audience is prepared is key. But also in terms of actually operating the vehicles, there's a lot that's new, there's a lot that's changed, there's a lot that's different. So we're creating driver training. We're creating a series of videos that'll actually help with that operator training. We want our customers, our drivers, and even our salespeople to a degree seeing this product for the first time to have that confidence and be able to effectively operate the vehicle.
It's early, of course, in the parts business. Hopefully you don't need parts right away. But the thought is, I mean, you've got a role there for parts and service as well. We talked about service, but from a parts perspective, how does that training go? Is that anything that, is done maybe a little later because, that's more when the parts questions come in?
Yeah, and that's in great partnership with the parts department as well. So making sure that, they're following all standard procedures and stocking protocols as well. But to your point, ideally, that's something that comes in down the road and we won't have to worry about that for a little while.
Right. You mentioned new hires, and I know that's true, of course, in the dealership world as well, because there's turnover and there's, when you have a good area that, you're growing, you're adding people and things like that. How quickly can someone come up to speed on a brand new truck? I mean, it seems like it might take a little while.
It's a journey, and I think you mentioned earlier it's not a one and done. We know it's a continuous process, a continuous journey as it comes to training and learning.
Right.
And this product is no different. So
yeah, no, I was gonna say, I mean, there's got to be certain areas that you hit hard because maybe we'll remember. Somebody might tell us something. There's some training. I'm sure you're familiar with it. If you're told something 9 times, you're not likely to remember 9 things. But if you're told something 3 times 3, it works, right? And there's probably a version of that goes into your world. So what is it that you want, especially the dealers and the salespeople, to be communicating or to remember to communicate?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's all about repetition. You can't tell somebody something enough. And when, to answer your question, it's all about the customer value. It's the value proposition to the customer. It's how this product can support their business and their full operation, whether that be, you take the approach of the human-centric value as it relates to our new safety platform and the peace of mind knowing that your drivers are protected on that front. All the way through the actual dollar figure value that comes with the fuel economy improvements and everything in between. And we can't say that enough. So we really try to put the salesperson, our audience, in the customer seat. We really try to get them to experience that and hear that over and over and give them the tools so they can have that conversation with their customer, since that's really how they learned it themselves.
I'll take both of the examples you gave, and I'll start with safety. Safety is one of those things where, yes, you do have that peace of mind for the driver and some of the things that, are there to protect him or her. But you also have another consideration, and that is crashworthiness, nuclear verdicts, all the things that come into play. And I'm sure that's got to be part of the message that goes out to another audience, which is, the C-suite, where they're having to think about some of these things. And if, Volvo has been synonymous with safety on the car side and the truck side for a really long time. So you have that going for you as you go in, right? But you must have some messaging that is meant for others in there too.
One thing that we, when we looked at how do we train on safety, this is such a impressive, the technology is so impressive, and really how do you get that point across? How do you have somebody experience or understand how the enhancements that have come with current features as well as new features in this platform? And honestly, one really wouldn't have the chance to experience some of these unless, God forbid, they're in that situation.
Right.
And we hope that they never are.
Right.
But that did pose a challenge to us of how do we effectively communicate this and show that value. And that's where we decided to leverage a new technology for us in virtual reality. So we were able to put the salesperson and the customer actually behind a virtual truck. We gave them the headset, the goggles, a steering wheel and pedal. So they were actually driving and interacting with the vehicle. And we took them through 5 safety features. So they got to experience it, they got to see it firsthand,
Right.
and really understand how the product would react in that situation. So very successful, very effective way to conduct that training. And to your point, it's that messaging and really being able to articulate it to a variety of audiences.
And if I'm a person who's been through that training, it's now mine. I can actually describe what I felt, what I saw, and
Exactly.
what I experienced,
Mhm.
in that. The other area that you mentioned was, I think, was in the sort of in the pricing and how do you get it, some of those things. And that's a speccing story, and that's also
Mhm.
a value story. I think it's 10% better fuel economy is what you're
Right.
touting. Right there, that's a number that pencils for everybody,
Mhm.
right? You don't have to think much about that. But there obviously are some other things, that go into that. Are there certain areas that you hit specific to, getting someone to look at this, because a new truck is more expensive than an old truck, right? So you've
Sure.
got to do that comparison. So you've got to say, here's the legacy truck and here's this new truck. How did you sort of bridge some of those areas?
Yeah, well, absolutely. We looked at each of those value pillars again, as we call them. So safety, fuel efficiency, driver productivity, connectivity, and uptime. We were actually able to put a dollar figure on each of those.
Okay.
We were actually able to walk the salesperson through, again, putting them in their customer shoes, giving them dollar figures to be able to go to their customer and say, comparing the legacy VNL versus the all new VNL, here's the dollar figure, here's what we're actually gaining in value, and here's how this can support your business. But the real challenge and opportunity with training is, you can train somebody on something all day long, but if they don't know how to apply it, they don't know how to conduct those conversations and how to really tailor the conversation to their customer, their audience, then it can only go so far.
Sure.
So really our focus has been around how do you prepare somebody to have those successful conversations, again, tailoring them and being mindful to adapt them to their customer. Um,
What, let's call it three, because I used that number earlier, sort of 3 times 3. What three things then, if I am let's say I've been trained now on this truck, what are the three things that I'm supposed to remember each time? What if and this is the old, how do you measure success, right?
Sure.
Your training success comes because I, as a salesperson or whatever, remember what you told me. What are those three things that absolutely have to remember? And you can pick any pillar you like.
I'll have to put some thought into that one.
Yeah.
That's a good
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
So, I go back to, we've got the 5, right? We've
Right.
got, and there is a dollar figure on each of those.
Sure.
So if you look at fuel efficiency, I think that's a great opportunity.
Mhm.
We really give them the tools to compare their current product or their current legacy VNL against the all new VNL. They can really see just, that 10% figure you gave. They can really see how that translates into dollars.
Sure.
How many, to make the same amount of profit and operating margin, how many more weeks they would need to drive or operate to make up that difference if they stayed with their current product. So that's number one.
Yep.
Number two would be, the cost to retain a new driver is so expensive. There's figures, upwards of $20,000 that it costs to retain or to hire, to bring on a new driver. So, if we can provide them with features and comforts and an experience in this all new VNL that helps to retain their drivers, that's additional money in their pocket.
Right. Yeah.
And
Avoided cost, basically.
exactly.
Yeah. We're a truck technology podcast for the most part. So let me kind of get you out of here on this. There are several pretty impressive, things that we've talked about in previous episodes where we've talked about the VNL. What one or two things really stand out that are like someone might go home and tell their spouse about or tell their significant other about, that this truck has, that, it just really helps in the training part of things? What are those?
Yeah, so I would say first would be our e-call feature.
Mhm.
So this is integrated into the truck. If it senses any kind of an accident or collision, it will actually call 911. It'll also call the fleet as well and notify them with GPS of where the truck was located in the event of, again, God forbid, in the event of an accident or an emergency.
Right. I'm familiar with the e-call feature and also the emergency button that you can push because of OnStar. OnStar developed this, and I have no idea if there's any carryover, but it sounds very similar to what OnStar has featured really for decades now in the passenger car space.
And it has, absolutely. And this is industry leading for us. So while it's been available on passenger cars for years and years, it's something that is the trucking industry is just now catching up to, and we're the first manufacturer to offer this in our vehicle.
Yeah. Haley, it's been great getting a chance to get caught up a little bit on the things that go into training, importance of it and really the criticality of it as you are now, fully in launch, with the vehicle. So thanks very much for being part of Truck Tech.
Thank you, Alan. Great to be here.
Okay.
Thank you.